Got it.
Got it. What if I just left? I'm with Kim Iversen, continuing our creator series here on locals to talk about your experience with locals and just being a creator and all of the things. So, just tell us quickly a little bit about yourself for people who might not know who you are.
Well, I used to call myself a YouTuber, but now I don't know, right? Because I think so many of us have hightailed it off of YouTube or have limited our exposure there. And so now we've kind of diversified. So I don't know if I would call
Mhm.
myself like a Rumbler or something. I
I'm a
haven't quite
Rumbler.
Yeah, I haven't started my Rumble channel yet, but that's this weekend. I plan to upload a bunch of stuff and get it up there. But yeah, so I do a digital show. I launched it about, I would say, what are we getting? What year are we coming up to?
I don't even know.
So I think I've had it. So January of 2019 is when I launched the show on YouTube, a political talk show. And now I still do political talk, but I'm also with The Hill, which is I host on Hills Rising, and I still do my independent show. I'm still independent, but that's what, yeah. So I'm an independent political digital talk show host, I guess.
How did you get into this kind of commentary? Is it your background or did you go to school for it or?
Well, I have a background in radio, so I actually did a radio talk show for years. So when I was in college, I started in college radio, and
Mhm.
then I did a talk show, and I actually DJ'd on alternative rock stations. So I was on in Sacramento at KWOD, and then which was also known as Quad at the time. That station doesn't exist anymore, but it's a heritage alternative rock station. And then I moved around the country doing radio for various radio stations, and then did my own radio talk show, long form talk show, for years as a syndicated talk show host that was heard all around the country on the FM dial on hot AC stations. And then I decided to leave radio because I just felt like at the time I was I was like 37, and I just thought 36, 37, and I thought, radio, I don't know where radio is going, and I've got a long career to think about. And so I decided to leave radio and go on my own, and didn't really know what I was going to do. My contract was up and I didn't want to renew it. So I kind of traveled around for a year or something. And then I just realized I really love politics. My producers, when I was doing my radio talk show, which had nothing to do with politics, it was newsy and relationships and things that are interest of women's lives, which a lot of that does have a lot to do with news, no politics though. But my producers would always be like, stop talking politics, it's time to go on air. Because I'd always talk politics off air,
Uh-huh.
get into it and talk about things. And then we'd have to like shows on, time to switch the subject. So I realized I love politics so much that I should just talk about it. But I felt my biggest worry before going and launching my show was I just thought, where do I even fit in? I don't really
Right.
fit with the left fully. I don't really fit. I definitely don't fit with the right. And so I didn't really know what, I just thought, I don't know if people are going to like this or me, if I'm going to get run out of here. So I launched the show, and I do have I've always been interested in politics. When I was in the fifth grade, I actually, I proposed legislation to the
Oh,
state.
wow.
So, yeah. And I went and spoke to the committees and went to the House, the legislative, the Idaho State Legislature, and kind of did the whole process when I was in the fifth grade. And it was an anti-deforestation bill. So it was all about planting trees, or at least replanting trees after they've been
Mhm.
chopped down and stuff. And then in my early 20s, I did some lobbying for some environmental activist groups. I was always into the environmental stuff. And then, so I have a bit of a background in politics and whatnot, but not anything, I've never lived in Washington, D.C. I've only been
Right.
twice.
You didn't come up through the poli-sci world.
No, not at all. And I actually think that's, now that I am doing the Hill Rising and kind of more in that world, I think it's a big benefit to not be a Beltway insider.
Right.
The thing is, they're all friends.
I
So,
know.
and because they're all friends, they don't want to talk trash about each other. They don't want to like really get into it because they know, they're the best friend of the spouse of somebody, or somebody's living at somebody's house or something, it's like, they're all besties. And
Yeah.
so, I like that I live in LA and that I'm not involved in the inside, the Beltway, but I don't know, they might make me move, but I'm hoping I
Oh,
can stay.
wow. I know their kids are all in play groups together and stuff. It's funny.
Yeah.
That
So,
was what I realized.
yeah, so it really makes me realize the problem with media and DC and why it's like an echo chamber
Yeah.
on both sides, right? Because they're all friends with one another. And even if they say, oh, yeah, I'm Democrat and I'm a Republican, they're all like hanging out together and like literally in bed together.
Yep. It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
So,
It's definitely like a big incestuous scene. I remember learning that very early when I was we have a lot in common. In the more I hear you talk, the more I realize how much, in particular, not really knowing where we belong in the space. I kind of stumbled into the space, so it wasn't even necessarily that intentional. And I remember going on some of my early media hits and really understanding that everybody kind of, once the cameras were off, were buddies and chummy, and all their
yeah.
kids went to had play dates and went to the same schools. And my cousin called me crying and she was like, how could you do a media hit on like XYZ channel? And I was like, this is all theater. Like these people are all friends. They want you to be crying about this, but I'm telling you, it's not real.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that's what I've kind of realized, it really makes it to where it's difficult to sort of parse out what is actually, what is going on in Washington and politics. And I think it's created a lot of us that feel like we're outsiders, right?
yeah.
I mean, we're all feeling like, what is going on here? And we feel gaslit by the media and gaslit by politicians. And it's because they are kind of gaslighting us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I launched the channel and I categorize myself as a progressive. I was a
Mhm.
big supporter of Bernie Sanders and then also Tulsi Gabbard. And when I became a fan of Tulsi's, I realized there was like this divide in the progressive world and that, anybody who supported Tulsi was like called a right winger.
Right.
But then I realized, well, it's because we do actually agree with the right on some things.
Right.
So, and there's no problem with that. But the left has gotten to a point where they're like, if you even like one thing about the right, then you are a racist, right?
Nationalist.
Yeah, you're a white nationalist and all this. And I think the right probably does that as well. Like people that if they like anything about the left, they're like, you commie, you Marxist socialist.
I see it with the way like never Trumpers are treated in the party. Yeah. So if they're critical of the, dear leader at the time, it seemed like there was a big division there.
Yeah.
And a lot of that similar kind of, well, if you're not with us, you're in the out group. And it does seem like in both of the parties, what I've realized is like apostasy is the worst sin of all. They treat, somebody who's maybe critical of their own party or leaving the party for whatever reason and becoming an independent almost worse than like the infidels on the other side. That's been world. It is crazy. And I think I always feel like I don't, I'm like, I'm somewhere between Bernie and Tulsi, and then I'll hear things on the right that I agree with. And I feel like I don't know where I belong. And I actually think a lot of people feel that way and maybe just are like taking from the buffet of politics, but don't feel necessarily represented by anyone or media or having it all. But I do think this is why creative people like yourself and independents who just aren't willing to allow themselves to be defined are finding an audience because they're hungry for it. So
and my audience I've found is very mixed. A lot of there's half of them have always voted Republican, but they find themselves not fully fitting into the Republican camp, and half of them have always voted Democrat and they don't feel like they fit into the Democrat camp either. So it's like a really interesting mix of people. But I do think that I think that independent mindset, that sort of in the middle independent mindset, not to be confused with being a moderate. There's like a difference, I think.
Or a centrist.
Right. Or yeah. There's a difference with this. Like a lot of people say, oh, so you're a centrist, you're a moderate. And it's like, no, that's different than what we're talking about. But I do think it's like a third or even 40 or 40% of the people are in that category. I just think that we're not as loud as the extremes on the other side, right?
Right.
They dominate the conversation. And they dominate for sure, like Twitter. You get run out of Twitter, you say one thing, and suddenly you run out of town.
Yep. So how does that play out on something like locals? What are you using your locals for primarily?
Well, locals has been great because it helps me build the people that do want more of that content that's real, that they're not getting in other places. They feel like other places are sort of just playing to one side,
right.
not giving them the truth, or not giving them mostly the truth. I think a lot of people come to my community because they want the truth, and they just want it in a place where they're going to get it unfiltered. They're not going to get any of this, well, I have to be sensitive because, big tech is going to get me, or and it's just a place where I think a lot of people are attracted to it because they want to find other like-minded people that they can have conversations with. So I think that's the smart thing that locals did, was create this community, rather than it just being like a place for me to post more content.
Right.
It's like a Facebook in that way. And people like that. People like that Facebook, Twitter style. And they even will fight with each other a bit, which people like that.
Yep.
They like to have that controversy a little bit. And so it's a place where people can get together and they can talk about the things, that a lot of the topics that I present, but then they can just discuss it with each other or post more stuff. And so it's grown really, really fast, and people really seem to really like it a lot. So I think it's that's, I think, who's attracted to my community, people that just want more of that.
Yeah.
And honesty.
And what are you putting behind the paywall that you're not necessarily doing, presenting for the public, or what's different about your community, or what you're doing behind the gates?
Well, I need to do more behind the paywall. I get a little bit nervous about posting about, I'm like the shy, I'm actually really shy, being in front of the camera and being in radio my whole life. I'm actually really shy. But behind the paywall, I try to put stuff that's more about my personal life. So I'll take photos from things that I'm doing in my life, more of that kind of stuff behind the paywall. And then inside of the community itself, I'll post more content that people don't get anywhere else, like more like live streams, and just more content about the topics that people care about. But yeah, so and behind the paywall, I try to put maybe some casual live stream type stuff,
Yeah. We did one yesterday, actually, where I made pesto. I'm pivoting.
Oh.
So we've been doing very casual things like that, just to try and, because I have a very similar audience. I was watching kind of people, somebody posted about something the right is doing, and then some people were like, well, I think this, and then I didn't realize how many anarchists were in my community.
Yeah.
And I was like, I love that we have this massive, diverse community where we can have these conversations about one topic, but have completely different backgrounds and viewpoints on it. And I really had no idea how many anarchists were in there, because that's something that fascinates me.
Maybe I should put that on my wall. Like, how many of you are anarchists?
You might be surprised. Yeah. More and more, it appears these days.
You know what's great about it is that there's a lot of people. I do have a lot of different people in the community, and they span, but I don't think I have anybody too much in the left, only because the left has been more about cancel culture. So they get really offended really easily, and then they just don't want to be there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Although the real diehard Trump supporters are similar in that way.
They're very similar.
Yeah. So they'll kind of be like, how dare you? That's it. I'm done with you. You think that Trump lost the election. So,
Yeah.
And then suddenly it's like, I'm done.
Yeah.
But otherwise, a lot of the people, they get together and they like that they can disagree with one another, and it doesn't result in, oh, well, I'm done with you.
Right. I've found too that they just like having a place that's not necessarily public, where they can talk about some of the things that you should be able to talk about publicly, but have become kind of third rails, like whatever. I mean, there's a million, but right now the big one seems to be like, how do you feel about the booster? And
Right.
people don't necessarily want to have that conversation in public, but they might have questions and concerns, and they might be looking for different opinions. And again, this is another area where I've seen that my audience is like all over the map, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, I have found that that is exactly right. The community really likes that they have a place to share stuff and they're safe sharing it.
Yeah.
Sometimes though, that it can get a little bit like where I'm like, wow, okay, I don't know. Depending on the topic, some topics, people will post stuff, and I'm like, well, I don't know if I agree with that, but I guess people can think what they want to think, I suppose. So it's really interesting but I always enjoy reading or hearing about what people do think, even if I don't agree with it. I think,
right.
And that's what's kind of lost in the political landscape these days, is that ability, not even just the political landscape, but just cultural landscape, right? We're not able to just be honest about what we think.
Yeah.
Without somebody then calling us, some sort of crazy name.
Yeah.
And so even if sometimes, like, there was a period of time where my followers were posting stuff on the wall that I was like, oh my God.
You're like, what's my following like?
Yeah, like, I don't know. But then, I kind of thought about it more, and I just thought, well, people need to have the ability to state what they think. I think it's better for us to know what other people think rather than pretend like they think something other than what they actually think, which is what society wants to do right now, right? They want to like sweep it all under the rug and be like, no, you're not allowed to think that. So even if you do think it, you need to keep it to yourself. Like, don't say anything. It's like, I'd rather know what people think.
Yeah.
I'd rather know. But so I do appreciate that about the community, because sometimes I learn things. There are certain things that maybe I've always grown up being like, oh no, that's a conspiracy theory. And now I'm like, maybe they're right.
I just interviewed someone the other day, and they were like, I find myself more and more saying, like, if I was a conspiracy theorist, to the point that she's like, am I a conspiracy theorist now?
Hey, you know what? I'm proud to be one, because at this point, the conspiracy theorists have been right about a lot of stuff.
A lot.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, fine. Call me a conspiracy theorist. I mean, they're the ones like accurate a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's true. And I do think that, again, people who might not have like a blue check protecting them, not that that's any real protection at all.
I'm like, I got the blue check on Twitter. They finally gave that to me. Surprisingly, because my Twitter account always gets the 24-hour ban.
You're like always in Twitter
I'm always in trouble. Yeah. So I was surprised they actually did it, but I think it's because I like harassed them enough about it. I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, according to community, I'm allowed to have this dumb blue check. So
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if it's any protection. I'm thinking any minute now I'm going to get deactivated for life.
I mean, I've had friends who didn't have a blue check and didn't have kind of the protection of a mob or an audience, and they get deactivated without any. There's not, really? They're just suspended, and that's it. So I do think
it might get worse, right? I don't know who the new guy is. I haven't looked into him, but maybe it'll get better. I don't know, because I don't know anything about the new guy, but I think people are worried it's going to get worse. So who knows?
Mm-hmm. I know they've deactivated like a lot of maybe parody accounts, or one account that was taking Nancy Pelosi to task for all of her like insider trading. Wow. And alleged, and but not, and people just, I think, need a place, which is what I love about locals. They need a place to be able to talk about this where they feel like they aren't going to get kicked off their social media platform. A lot of people need that for work. Yeah. So they're not really posting what they actually feel like. What I'm also hearing in my community is that it's a place where people, particularly in left-wing cities, so I'm actually surprised by how many people from flyover states are there, but then also lots of people in Portland and Seattle and LA, and people who feel like they're on the wrong side of the predominant ideology and cannot be honest about how they feel, and feel legitimately like they're going crazy, like they're completely isolated. And so these communities, I've found, provide at least some kind of relief for people like that. Like, oh, I'm not alone. I just want to know I'm not alone, and wondering this stuff, or having these questions, or thinking, am I going crazy?
Yeah.
Being mad that the city is crime ridden and crime addled, and I can't say it to my friends. It's a very strange, time. And I do think these little oases, I don't know what the plural of oases,
Oases. I think
oases.
I think. I don't
That's
know.
a weird
Don't ask
word.
me. When it comes to language and words and stuff, I'm always screwing them up.
Whatever that word is, I
Yeah.
think that these places have really become, also in a weird way, little pockets of, I know we try to foster a real attitude around like mental health and wellness, and I do workouts with all the women in my community. So we really I try to really get above the politics all the time. Hence why, like, sometimes when I see things that are being posted in the community, I'm like, okay, we need a pesto live stream.
That's really good. That's really smart. Yeah.
We need to make it we need to wholesome it up in here.
Yeah. That's good. I think that's a good idea. I should start doing more of that, kind of bringing it in a little bit, or just kind of even separating from politics here and there, because especially my community right now, we're all very like kind of COVID obsessed.
Everybody
And
is.
yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah.
so it's just, and it's depressing, especially, you and I living in LA. It's a depressing place to live during a pandemic. One of the worst. My family's in Idaho, and they don't have the issues that we have here.
No.
And now here we have like segregation, and that it's just getting so bad that it's like hard not to want to just focus on that, right? Because it's like so in our faces. You want to go get a haircut, and they're like, "Where's your vaccine card?"
I know.
It's like, it's really crazy.
I went out last night, and I avoid going out for this reason, because I've been in so many red states since the pandemic. I've spent so much time not in blue states. And I went out last night for the first time, and it was the first time I had to show my vaccine card and my ID. And I was like, this is so dumb. This is so dumb. It just made me so mad, even going through it, and then walking to the table and taking off the mask, and the waitress being masked, but we're not. I was like, all of this is theater. Speaking of theater. And I do think people in blue states are losing their minds.
Yeah, I mean, I won't participate in it. I think it's so dangerous that I just won't participate in it at all.
So you won't go out to eat or anything?
We went to a restaurant recently, and they asked, and I said, I'm not gonna participate. I'm leaving.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I won't engage in it. I just think it's really, really wrong.
I agree.
Yeah. So, and we're talking about like possibly moving, I mean, it's just because it's really tough to live here. And then I wonder, are they ever going to lift the restrictions in LA, or is this here to stay? I mean, how is that going to work? And there's a lot of businesses that aren't even adhering to it though. So a lot of them are just like, they don't want to have anything to do with it. They don't want to have to enforce this, or, put their hostess at risk.
I know.
Asking, then somebody gets mad, like who knows how somebody's going to react, So yeah, it's really crazy times, and people definitely need a relief. But I do think people that are living in those flyover states and those red states, they're not understanding it as much, because they're kind of, although they are when it comes to like the mandates for work, right? A lot of them in those red states are being mandated for work, and they're very, they're very, very upset about that. But they don't have the extra layer that we have here, which is, okay, now you can't live life in certain parts of the city, which is the funny part about it here, is that it's in certain parts of the city.
Right.
Because I live in Marina, it's like, it's not actually LA.
Right.
So we're not under the same restrictions right around me as like a block away. And then suddenly a block away, Starbucks asks you for your vaccine card. But if you're on this side of the street, they don't.
COVID only likes one side of the tracks.
COVID only likes Venice, right? So if you're in Venice, you got a problem. But if you're in Marina or Santa Monica doesn't have the restrictions, and neither does Marina del Rey, but Venice does. So it's like, you got to
Santa Monica does.
No, I don't think they do. No, they can fight a county.
Oh, really? Because they were just demanding that everybody show their vaccine passport at some place that my family member went.
Oh, if it's a large, like a event, the county has a lot.
It was a restaurant.
Oh, it was. It might have
Yeah.
just been their own rule.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
some restaurants are just, because the county said we encourage you to do it, but you don't have
Got it.
to. So, but LA City makes them do it.
Got
But
it.
yeah, so I don't think, yeah. So I mean, it's just kind of weird. Like you have to get through that 1 mile of Venice, and then suddenly, like you're in this, other area or whatever. But yeah, it's just crazy, crazy times, right? And people need a place to go to where they can
And
talk about how nutty this is
yeah.
without worrying that they're going to be labeled in some way, some derogatory label like anti-vaxxer,
Mhm.
or anti-masker or domestic terrorist at this point. You're a parent that doesn't want to put a mask on your child, you're a domestic terrorist.
It's so crazy. It's so crazy. I'm pregnant, and it's like it's really given me a whole other level of insight into, I think I'm very Gen X about everything. So I was like, I got the J&J
Yeah.
pretty early, didn't care. My husband and I are in recovery. We always joke, we're like, we were drug addicts. Like, this is probably not the worst thing we've ever put in our bodies. We're not going to start getting too precious now, whatever. But then when the goalposts started, mind you, this was also before all the goalposts started shifting and people started, like the conspiracy theorists started being right. And then we were like, and then I found out I was pregnant. And now I'm like, I don't know. I don't know what to do. And
Yeah.
I feel like that's completely acceptable. And like you're saying, what I find in my locals community is people can ask that question and not be piled on and
Right.
told that they're just an idiot for not like lining up and getting the shot. They can have a conversation and say, hey, were you pregnant? What do you think? What is your opinion on this? And people are respectful. They're not name calling and shaming and trying to bully them into one side or another. And that is, like you said, very lost in the kind of public discourse.
Yeah, people want a place to go where they can actually connect with each other on these topics without getting that bombardment of, no, you're just wrong and you're just a horrible person and you're killing grandma, and you're the reason why this won't end. It's all your fault. That's, even though you like never leave your house, but it's your fault. So yeah, it's really nutty out there these days. And yeah, the goalposts are constantly shifting on this one, and people definitely, and that I think it has kind of grown the community for me in a way, because I've had people say to me, like, I didn't agree with you at first, but now I do. It's like everybody has their breaking point.
Right. You'd think. And then it seems like some people will never really have a breaking point either. So that's what's so fascinating about it almost what I've experienced in the way that I feel like there are two Americas now traveling around the country. I also feel like there's two kinds of people, and they're the people that are just on board with whatever and all in on kind of an ideology, whether that's Trumpism, whether that's the leftism or whatever you want to call it, wokeism.
Yeah.
And then there's a large and growing population of people who are like, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
They're just confused, very confused masses. And the kids are suffering, really. That's what I hear over and over in my community is people just wrestling with what to do with their kids who are suffering really severe mental health consequences from a lot of this, and just also the uncertainty and confusion when all the adults around you are losing it. That's not great for children.
Right. And it spans beyond COVID. It's like everything right now is so hyper. If you're not in line with this particular narrative, then you're this horrible human being who shouldn't even be, you're a pariah to society, right? So if you don't agree that it was peaceful protests during BLM, like that it was all, it's like buildings are burning down and places are being looted. And if you don't say, well, yeah, but maybe you deserved it, right? Your business probably deserved it, or
Right.
because you've had all this historical benefit in life because of your skin color or something. I mean, it's like if you don't go along with these ideas, then it's if you stop and say, guys, come on, like I don't think that is a peaceful protest. This guy's like
Yeah.
literally burning down a building, and it's like if you say that, then you're on the other, you're a racist, you're a white nationalist, like you're just a horrible human being. And it's like, you don't want to put a mask on your kid. You're this horrible domestic terrorist who's killing grandma. I mean, it's insane how it feel, it's like, I didn't know. And now I'm like kicking myself because I'm just like, well, if I just hadn't thought it, it wouldn't have happened. But I was like, before the pandemic, I thought, I wonder what they're going to do next. Like they're so visceral about like the race stuff, right? And they're turning it into this war inside of our own communities. That what are they going to possibly do next to turn us against one another? And then there was the pandemic, and I was like, did I cause this? Spoke this into existence. And then I'm afraid to say it again. I'm afraid to be like, now what's next?
No, I know. And that's the other interesting thing is there's so many conspiracies, quote unquote, are they, aren't they? But again, in the community, I find that is a place where people can test them, debate them, push back, laugh about it. There's a big comedy element in our community, a big music element. I keep trying to like rise up into the common humanity. That's where I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
In the community and just fostering that. And I see them now all meeting one another out in real life and having little meetups. And I hope that kind of attitude of tolerance and just respecting one another's common humanity, even if we might be differing of opinion, and really trying to bring people together, because I can easily see how you could fall into that trap even in one of your own communities of being all like, next thing you know, you're just like a COVID conspiracy community.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really good. It reminds me, my locals community kind of reminds me of how it used to be at,
right.
Like for family gatherings.
Yeah.
It used to be where you just didn't agree with each other. You had Democrat family members and Republican family members, and you had those that believed all kinds of crazy conspiracies and, like flat earthers or something. And it's like, you talked about it. You kind of then was like, oh, okay, whatever. And you roll your eyes and you enjoy your meal. Right. And you find something else to talk about that you agree on, like whether it be sports or something other than like these politics. And you just say, yeah, okay. I got some wacky uncles or whatever. And it just used to be that way. Like we would be able to have a discussion and disagree, and it wouldn't turn into like, you're not invited to Thanksgiving,
we weren't all radicalized.
Right. But now, I mean, families really were not invited to each other's Thanksgiving.
I know.
Because they're like, if you're not vaccinated, you can't come. If you're not triple vaccinated, then, you can't come.
Yep.
And that is just such a different, and even before COVID, when it was, oh, you voted for Trump, I don't want to have anything to do with you if you voted for Trump. And I was that person. I did that. I was that person right after Trump won. Yeah. After Trump won, I ran my own mom out of my Thanksgiving that year.
Wow.
I was so mad at her because she was sitting there gloating. She was like, Trump won. My mom is this Vietnamese immigrant living down in Orange County.
And I love Trump.
Yeah. And she was just like, oh yeah, Trump won. Oh my God, so great. And like, I was just getting so mad. And I finally just was like, that's it, Mom, like leave, go. I mean, I ran her out of my house. I feel really ashamed of that. But that was the attitude that was like being fostered at that time. It was this is a racist, bigot, sexist, and anyone else who supports him is also those things. And it's like, even though my mom, a woman who's a refugee from Vietnam,
right,
is like not a racist or a sexist, maybe a bigot. I mean, who knows? Just kidding, Mom. Just kidding. You're not a bigot. But but I was the bigot, right? I was the bigot. And because there she wasn't being mean. She wasn't, she wasn't being rude to anybody. She was just happy her candidate won. And
Yep.
I was the bigot that ran her out of the house. I was the one who was angry and hateful and
Yep.
ran her out. And, but that was because that was the attitude that was being pushed by like CNN and MSNBC. And I was believing that. And I fell into that. And then I woke up, at some point, I woke up that year. And I realized this is not, things are not the way they're portraying them. And this is just creating like just laying the groundwork for a civil war amongst us.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, to me, it is just so dangerous, and it's worse. Unfortunately, I don't know how it got worse, but it got worse. But, my locals community, I feel like, because there's a lot of us that don't agree with one another, but we're able to just say, I don't agree. I'm not at that point yet when it comes to like the pandemic conspiracies. And, I didn't believe a lot of them, they were like, Kim, they're going to mandate it. And I was like, guys, no, they're not.
Like, calm down.
Mandate it. We live in America. They're not going to do that. Now here I am like, oh God.
You're like, oh shit, what's next?
Yeah, I didn't know. Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah. So then I'm like, what did you guys say about what was next? So
you're like, where's the Great Reset plan that you showed me?
Yeah, I'm starting to get to the point where I'm like, maybe there is a microchip in this.
I get it though. This is why I think it's so important to have communities like what you're saying, where not only I think is it like, we call ours the fam actually, and not only is it like a family and that we all disagree and people fight and they hate each other sometimes and they make up and they have very vast differences in opinion about politics, but they put them aside. And that is why I've really started to like, we did a whole baking pies live stream right before Thanksgiving, because I'm like, breaking bread is one of those things that we can do and it brings people together. And I'm trying to have those more familial feelings. But also somebody that I interviewed very early in this series, Z-Dog, mentioned that this is also like the early promise of the internet. He was like, this is what the kind of early promise of the internet was all about, this kind of discourse that exists when you have these communities that are respectful of one another and not being driven by these incentives to, be radicalized, polarized, and hate each other.
Well, Facebook, in a lot of ways was that for a while, right? Facebook kind of had that element of you just connecting with all your friends and family. And then I guess everybody can say whatever they want and you can just choose to ignore them. And then
not anymore.
They just, they like got sucked into the trap of like, oh no, now you guys are fueling terrorism and political meddling and all this stuff. And so now they're like,
the algorithms took over. I don't even think they fell into the trap. I think they became victims of their own algorithms that just pushed people into, and then you see the same thing on YouTube. It's like that those algorithms are so strong. And I think that's what makes locals, something that I love about locals, is that those incentives are not there.
Right.
It removes them. People are not incentivized to make some really super feisty hot take because they're going to get upvoted or retweeted. It's really all gone. And when you remove those incentives and those algorithms, you have actual humans having conversations again.
Yeah. And that's what, in the beginning when Facebook started kind of doing the censoring stuff, I was like, why? I don't understand. If I'm friends with somebody or if I'm following a page, I chose to be there, right? So why are you censoring them? I'm there. I'm in the community. I'm their friend. I chose to be. If I don't want to be, I'll just leave. I don't understand why we have to like do this censoring thing. But yeah, it's because they morphed the platform into something different. And locals is that what it always was supposed to be, where it's like, it's your community and people can say what they want and do what they want inside of your community, within obvious reason. Nobody's going to allow anything illegal. Nothing is like free speech. People always kind of get that confused. They think that you could just say anything. And it's like, no, you can't say illegal stuff, right? You can't promote illegal things. But beyond that, like you should be able to say what you think about things and your opinion about things, as long as, and my only request to my community is I'm like, look, I'm not going to censor you, but you have to be respectful because this is like my party. and you're
Right.
at my party. And if you're going to be rude to each other at my, I mean, you don't have to agree with one another or whatever, but if you're at my party, like I could kick you, I reserve the right to kick you out of my party.
Totally. I mean, we have one rule, really. Our primary rule is don't be a dick. That's like
Right.
our number one
Right.
philosophy. And then, we have other things like don't give unsolicited advice unless people are asking for it, because a lot of people really get vulnerable in the community and open up about things going on in their life. We've got people through all kinds of illnesses, through losing their pets, through, there's been so much camaraderie that I see, and I really find it inspiring. And I know that Locals is the place that I go when I'm feeling kind of defeated by the culture wars, that I go to replenish and to fill my kind of spiritual cup up with like, okay, this is humanity. This is more of what's actually normal. And what I'm seeing is like you said, the radical extremes generally on the media and on social media. And this is actually more the like human connection underneath all of this noise. And I find that it is like my little oasis to escape.
You're giving me so many good ideas of how I should be transforming my community, actually. So I'm like getting it now. I'm like, oh, so, I could even do more of building it like a community rather than like, so it should be, I like that. I like that idea of bringing people into the fold who just do feel kind of run out of town when it comes to Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, just their own family. I mean, I have one woman in my community who, I mean, it was the worst story. I mean, she was sympathizing with me because my Thanksgiving this year was really, I had a lot of drama surrounding Thanksgiving this year because of vaccinated versus unvaccinated.
Okay.
And I have a lot of different, I have a huge family, and there are a lot of different Thanksgivings every year. There's always multiple different satellite Thanksgivings going on. And some of the Thanksgivings, like if you were unvaccinated, you weren't allowed to go. And it was just really, it was a really challenging year this year for me. And I had a woman that she just told me the saddest story. She's like, oh, it's, I have one child. My husband, like the father was not in the picture since birth. And it was just always her and her daughter. And her daughter, she gave her daughter everything in the world, like education and everything. And they were always best friends and loved each other. And her daughter went off to UC Berkeley for school. Yeah, which would make a parent proud. It's an excellent.
I already know where this is going.
Yeah. So excellent university. I mean, like, you got to get good grades. You got to be really smart to get into that school and all of this. But we all know how Berkeley is, right? We know how Berkeley in particular is like one of the most radical in the country.
Yeah.
And so her own daughter was just like, if you're not vaccinated, I don't want anything to do with you. And her mom doesn't want to get the vaccine. And, for her own reasons, she's got multiple reasons as to why she doesn't want to take it. And, but her daughter basically alienated her and has, really gone off the deep end in the way, she's treating her mom kind of how I treated my mom,
right?
Really, after Trump won. But worse, like, she just alienated her.
Right.
Totally. So she's completely alienated. And that's, she has nobody to talk to, she's just spent it alone without her daughter. And the mom is sick and older, and already doesn't think she has many years left in her life. And it's like, could you imagine the guilt that her daughter might, if something happens to her mom and then she realizes she treated her this way or alienated her in this way, like the guilt that could come from that, won't be healthy in the future.
No, we had a woman in our community and she invited literally anyone who had no place to go for Thanksgiving, and people drove like 1,500 miles. I was like, you don't know any of these people in this community. It was amazing. She's like, oh, we do it every year. We invite stragglers. That's just the way my family is. So why not extend it to people in this community? And I was like, this is what I need to remind myself of like this common humanity. And I wish I had known about her, because I would have told her to go to this Thanksgiving in Knoxville. And, I think I do think that locals in these communities are bonding like-minded people in this way. And I'm just grateful you're on there. I'm grateful that you are out in the world being independent. And where can we find all of your stuff?
Oh, good question. I mean, I'm going to be putting everything on Rumble. So
Yep.
everything will be there. I'm actually going to upload my entire catalog, I think. I was kind of debating what I was going to do, but I decided I think I'm going to go from start to finish. I'm going to start uploading my very first videos and kind of doing and building it out completely. I think I'm going to do that. Maybe I shouldn't say that because then you're going to hold me to that. And so I'm still thinking about that.
Okay.
But Rumble obviously is going to be a place where you can find all my stuff. And otherwise, Locals is the place to find my stuff. And then, there's various little hodgepodge places, but basically everything that's like really where, I mean, I'm on YouTube, obviously, with the Hill right now, for now,
And
until they kick me off.
and what's your social media before they kick you
Oh,
off?
I'm on Twitter at Kim Iversen Show. I'm on Instagram, but I haven't been able to log into my Instagram. I'm locked out of my account and I can't get back in. And I haven't been able to get back in for now it's been 8 or 9 months. I haven't been able to get into my Instagram, but that's at Kim Iversen.
Okay.
And also I'm on Facebook, of course, just still have I have a show page there as well.
Okay.
So.
Well, thank you so much for your time. And we'll definitely have to get you on my podcast as well.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome. But thank you for sharing about your locals, and I will have to join your community.